Before you hear a single word of the story, let me ask you something. What does it truly mean to be happy? Is it wealth? Is it success? Is it comfort? Or could it be something far deeper? Something we overlook every single day? Tonight, you are about to hear the voice of a man who endured the worst of humanity and still chose to smile. Eddie Jocko called himself the happiest man on earth. Not because his life was easy, but because he discovered a secret most of us never learn. This is not just a story. It's a wake-up call. Stay with me, and let Eddie's journey change the way you see life, love, and happiness forever. Imagine opening your eyes one morning and realizing that everything you once loved, everything you once trusted, has been taken from you. Your home is gone. Your freedom is gone. And even the simple dignity of being treated as a human being has been stolen. What would you do? Most people would collapse under the weight of despair. But one man, Eddie Jocko, chose a different path. He decided that even in the darkest night, he would find a reason to live. He decided that hatred would not define him. He decided, against all odds, to become the happiest man on earth. Eddie Jocko was born in Germany in 1920, and like any young boy, he dreamed of a future filled with family, education, and hope. He was proud to be German. He believed he belonged. But when the Nazis rose to power, that illusion was ripped away. Because Eddie was Jewish, his very existence became a crime. Overnight, he went from being a citizen to an outcast, from being a student to a target. The betrayal was sharp. Friends turned away. Neighbors looked at him with suspicion. And the country he loved told him he did not deserve to live. At just 18 years old, Eddie was sent to concentration camps. His world became one of fences, guns, hunger, and cruelty. Every single day, he faced death. Every single day, he watched others lose their will to go on. But Eddie made a choice. He said to himself, if I can live one more day, maybe tomorrow will be better. That simple decision, to hold on one day at a time, was the beginning of a lifelong lesson. Most of us will never know what it means to be imprisoned in Auschwitz. Most of us will never wake up to guards screaming, families torn apart, and hopes shattered. But here's the truth. Eddie's story is not just about the Holocaust. It is about what it means to be human. It is about what it means to suffer and still choose kindness. It is about what it means to look death in the face and still say, I choose life. Think about your own struggles. Maybe you've lost someone you loved. Maybe you've been betrayed. Maybe you felt like the world was against you. Pain is universal. But Eddie teaches us that while pain may be given to us, suffering is something we can decide. He refused to let the cruelty of others destroy the goodness inside him. He refused to let hatred poison his soul. And that is why, after surviving the Holocaust, after losing his family, after living through horror, he could still look at life and say, I am the happiest man on earth. The question is, how? How can a man who lost so much, who endured so much, choose happiness? The answer begins with gratitude. When Eddie was finally liberated, he looked at the simplest things, food, water, safety, and felt joy. Things you and I take for granted were treasures to him. Every breath was a gift. Every sunrise was a miracle. And every act of kindness, no matter how small, was a reminder that the world could still be good. In a world where most people chase money, status, or recognition, Eddie's life is a wake-up call. Happiness is not found in what we own. It's found in how we live. Eddie built a new life, not with bitterness, but with love. He married, raised a family, and every day reminded himself, I do not hate anyone. Hatred is a disease, and it only destroys the one who carries it. By forgiving, he freed himself. By loving, he healed himself. And by smiling, he inspired everyone who met him. Let me tell you something powerful. People didn't gather around Eddie because he was a victim. They gathered around him because he was a teacher. His lessons were not written in books. They were written in scars, in tears, and in survival. When he spoke, people listened because he was proof that no matter how much you have lost, life can still be beautiful. He was proof that joy is not reserved for the lucky. It is created by choice. So, let's pause for a moment. Ask yourself, what excuses are you making for not being happy? Is it because you don't have enough money? Is it because you've been hurt before? Is it because life has not been fair to you? Eddie lost everything: his parents, his home, his friends, his future. Yet he still chose to smile. If he could do it, what's stopping you? Eddie once said, "Life can be beautiful if you make it beautiful." Happiness is something we can choose. It is not dependent on rich or poor. It is a choice. And those words, spoken by a man who survived humanity's darkest hour, carry more weight than any motivational speech, any self-help book, or any quick fix you'll ever find. Because they are not theory. They are truth, forged in suffering and proven in survival. The story of Eddie Jocko is not meant to make you sad. It is meant to make you strong. It is a reminder that no matter what has been done to you, no matter what has been taken from you, the power to choose your attitude remains yours. And sometimes that is the only power you need. Tonight, when you close your eyes, think of Eddie. Think of the man who endured Auschwitz and still said, "I am happy." And ask yourself, if happiness was possible for him, why not for me? Because at the end of the day, the happiest man on earth is not someone who has everything. It is someone who appreciates everything they have. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine being told you don't deserve to live. Not because of anything you've done, not because of any crime, but simply because of who you are. Imagine being forced out of your home, your school, your community. Imagine the walls closing in, one freedom after another stripped away, until the only thing left is fear. This was Eddie Jocko's reality. And yet, within that darkness, he found a light that not even hatred could extinguish. Eddie was only a teenager when his world collapsed. He had been a brilliant student, studying engineering, proud of his achievements. But in Nazi Germany, his intelligence didn't matter. His dreams didn't matter. His humanity didn't matter. He was Jewish, and that was enough for the world to declare war on him. Arrested, beaten, and humiliated, he was thrown into concentration camps where survival was not expected, where cruelty was the language of the day, and where hope was an enemy more dangerous than hunger. But here's where Eddie's story becomes extraordinary. Most people, crushed by that level of despair, would have given up. Many did, but Eddie chose to cling to life. Every morning, he would wake up in that nightmare and whisper to himself, "One more day. Just live one more day." And that simple mantra kept him alive through starvation, through beatings, through endless cruelty. He understood something most of us overlook. Happiness doesn't come from the absence of pain. It comes from the decision to live despite the pain. Think about your own life. How many times have you thought, "I can't take this anymore"? Maybe it was a job that felt unbearable. Maybe it was a heartbreak that shattered you. Maybe it was the weight of responsibilities pressing down on your shoulders. But here's the truth that he teaches us. If you can survive one more day, you can survive the next. And if you keep going one day, the pain begins to lose its power. Endurance becomes strength, and strength becomes freedom. Eddie learned to look for reasons to keep going. Sometimes that reason was as small as a piece of bread shared by another prisoner. Sometimes it was the memory of his parents, the hope that he might one day honor their love by staying alive. And sometimes it was simply spite against the Nazis, refusing to let them win, refusing to let them take the one thing they wanted most, his spirit. You see, even in the darkest places, the human spirit can rise. And Eddie proved that the will to live can be stronger than any enemy. But Eddie also discovered something else, something even more powerful than endurance. He discovered the importance of friendship. In the camps, survival was not a solo mission. Alone you would wither, but together there was strength. Eddie found brothers in suffering, men who became his family when his real family was gone. They shared food, they shared warmth, they shared hope, and when one fell, the others lifted him. Without those bonds, Eddie admitted, he would not have survived. This is a lesson for all of us. In today's world, so many people believe happiness comes from independence, from being self-made, from proving they don't need anyone. But Eddie shows us that true strength is found in connection. We are not built to walk alone. We need people. We need kindness. We need love. The bonds we create with others are not just emotional luxuries. They are lifelines. They're the very fabric that keeps us alive when everything else falls apart. And maybe this is where we have gone wrong. In a world filled with technology, with noise, with competition, we have forgotten how to look at each other and truly connect. Eddie's story reminds us that even in a place built on hatred, friendship can be born. Even in a place built to kill, love can survive. If bonds can be forged in Auschwitz, then surely we can learn to build them in our everyday lives. Eddie once said that his friends in the camp gave him the strength to keep going, and because of that, he owed them his life. He carried that gratitude forever. It became part of his happiness, and it became a cornerstone of his philosophy, that no matter how cruel the world may be, there will always be people who can lift you, people who can remind you that life is worth fighting for. Think about it. Who are those people in your life? The ones who make you stronger, the ones who remind you of who you are when you've forgotten. Maybe it's a friend, maybe a parent, maybe a partner, or maybe you need to become that person for someone else. Because the truth is, you don't need to be in a concentration camp to know that life is hard. We all face battles. And sometimes, the only thing that keeps us going is knowing someone cares enough to fight alongside us. As the war dragged on, Eddie endured the unimaginable. Hunger so deep it gnawed at his bones. Beatings so brutal they left scars on his body and his soul. Cold so bitter it made every breath feel like knives in his chest. And yet, even in that suffering, he clung to a vision of the future. A future where he would live. A future where he would laugh. A future where he would build a family and prove that joy can rise from ashes. That vision was not a fantasy. It was survival. And eventually it became his reality. The message is clear. The story you tell yourself matters. If you believe tomorrow will be worse, then you will break. But if you can whisper to yourself, maybe tomorrow will be better, you give yourself a chance to endure. You give yourself a reason to fight. And sometimes that is enough. Eddie's ability to endure, to connect, and to hope made him unbreakable. They could take his freedom, his dignity, his family, but they could not take his will. And that is why, when the world finally changed and he was liberated, Eddie emerged not just as a survivor, but as a teacher, a man who had walked through hell and yet carried heaven in his heart. And so, I ask you this, what story are you telling yourself about your life? Are you telling yourself that it's too hard, that you can't keep going? Or are you telling yourself what Eddie told himself? Just one more day? Because one more day could be the day everything changes. One more day could be the day light returns. One more day could be the first step toward your own happiness. Eddie's story is proof. If he could live through the darkest nightmare and still become the happiest man on earth, then what excuse do we have? Happiness is possible, even here, even now, even for you. Picture this moment. The gates of hell finally open. After years of suffering, hunger, and fear, Eddie Jocko walks free. His body is weak, his family is gone, and his heart carries scars deeper than any wound. But in that moment of liberation, Eddie makes a decision that will define the rest of his life. He decides that he will not live as a victim. He decides that he will not carry hatred in his heart. He decides that he will build a new life, a life of gratitude, of kindness, and of joy. That was the day Eddie truly became the happiest man on earth. When Eddie was liberated, he had nothing. No parents, no home, no possessions. Just a body that had survived the impossible and a heart that refused to stop beating. Most people would have collapsed under the weight of grief. Most people would have been consumed by rage. But Eddie understood something profound. If he allowed hate to live inside him, then the Nazis would win twice. Once by trying to destroy his body, and again by poisoning his soul. And Eddie refused to let them win again. This is one of the most powerful lessons Eddie gives us. Forgiveness is not about forgetting what happened. Forgiveness is about freeing yourself from the prison of anger. Hatred, he believed, is a disease. It doesn't hurt your enemies. It only destroys you from the inside. Carrying hate is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Eddie chose a different way. He chose love. He chose kindness. He chose life. Think about that for a moment. How often do we hold on to grudges? How often do we replay betrayals in our minds, feeding our anger, feeding our resentment? We tell ourselves it's justice, but in truth, it's a chain. It keeps us locked in the past, unable to step forward. Eddie could have carried hatred for the rest of his days, and no one would have blamed him. But instead, he smiled. Instead, he loved. Instead, he built a future filled with light. And that choice is why his story inspires millions. After liberation, Eddie rebuilt his life from nothing. He moved to Australia, where he met Flor, the woman who would become his wife. Together, they built a family. They raised children. They created a home filled not with riches, but with laughter. And Eddie cherished every single moment, because to him, life itself was a gift. Every sunrise was a reminder that he had been given another day. Every meal was a blessing. Every hug was a miracle. Things we often overlook, Eddie celebrated with joy. He often said, "Life can be beautiful if you make it beautiful." Notice those words carefully. He didn't say life is beautiful. He said it can be. That means beauty is not automatic. It is a choice. It means no matter your past, no matter your pain, you can choose to see the good. You can choose to smile. You can choose to make life beautiful. This is not denial, it is strength. Because anyone can be happy when everything is perfect. Real happiness is when you can be grateful even when life is not. Eddie's life in Australia became a testimony to this truth. He worked hard. He provided for his family. And more than anything, he shared his story. Not to gain sympathy, not to remind the world of his suffering, but to teach. To show young people that hatred leads to destruction. To show them that love is stronger than cruelty. To remind them that they, too, can choose happiness, no matter what. He became a living example of resilience. A man who had seen the worst of humanity, but still believed in the best of it. And here's something beautiful. Eddie didn't just survive. He thrived. He lived to be 101 years old. Imagine that, a man who was supposed to die in a concentration camp, living more than a century, holding his great-grandchildren in his arms. That is the ultimate victory. That is proof that even the darkest night cannot stop the sunrise. Eddie's long life was not just years on a calendar. It was a message that life, when embraced with gratitude, can be full, rich, and deeply joyful. So let's pause and reflect. What are you holding on to that is stealing your happiness? Is it anger at someone who hurt you? Is it bitterness at life for not being fair? Is it the weight of disappointments you've carried for years? Ask yourself, what would Eddie do? He would let it go. He would smile. He would remind you that every moment spent in anger is a moment you lose in happiness. And life is too precious, too fragile to waste. Eddie once said, "Happiness does not fall from the sky. It is in your hands." Think about that. We live in a world where people chase happiness like it's something out there. A better job, a bigger house, more money, more recognition. But Eddie, who had none of those things when he started over, tells us the opposite. Happiness is not out there. It's inside. It is a decision you make every morning when you wake up. It's the way you choose to see your world. It's the way you choose to treat others. It's the way you choose to live. And maybe the most important thing Eddie teaches us is this. Happiness grows when you give it away. He didn't just keep his joy to himself. He shared it. He spoke to thousands of students, telling his story with a smile, reminding them of the dangers of hate, and inspiring them with the power of hope. He became a bridge between the past and the future. He turned his pain into purpose, and in doing so, he lit a fire of inspiration that will never die. Eddie's legacy is not just about surviving the Holocaust. His legacy is about how to live, about how to forgive, about how to love, about how to choose joy in a world that often gives us reasons to despair. And if Eddie could do that after losing everything, then so can we. So tonight, when you lay down to sleep, remember this. Life may not always be fair. Life may not always be kind. But life is always a gift. And happiness is always a choice. Eddie proved it day after day, year after year, for over a century. And his message echoes to us now, clear and strong. Smile, be kind, be grateful, and make life beautiful. Because if a man who walked through the gates of Auschwitz could still become the happiest man on earth, then so can you. There's a saying that you don't truly understand the value of life until you come close to losing it. For Eddie Jaku, that wasn't just a saying, it was reality. He lost his family, his freedom, his youth, He lost everything that once gave him a sense of belonging. But when he survived, when he walked away from the ashes, he discovered a truth that most people spend their entire lives searching for. Happiness is not found in what you have, but in how you choose to live each day. After the war, Eddie carried scars that were more than physical. His body bore the marks of starvation, of beatings, of brutality. But the deepest wounds were in his heart. The memory of his parents who were murdered, the cries of friends who never made it, the betrayal of neighbors who had once smiled at him but turned their backs when the Nazis came. How does anyone heal from that? How does anyone carry so much pain without being crushed by it? Eddie's answer was simple yet profound. He decided that the best way to honor those who died was to live fully. He chose to carry their memory not with sadness, but with gratitude. Every time he laughed, every time he smiled, every time he hugged his children, he was saying to the world, "They tried to destroy me, but they failed." His happiness was his revenge. His joy was his triumph. And here's something powerful. Eddie never denied his past. He didn't hide from it. He spoke about it openly, even though it hurt, because he believed the world needed to hear it. He believed young people needed to know what hatred can do, so they would never let it happen again. But every time he spoke, he didn't just tell a story of tragedy. He told a story of resilience. He reminded people that even in the darkest places, there is light. Even when life is cruel, you can still choose kindness. Even when everything is lost, you can still rebuild. Think about that for a moment. How often do we let small problems steal our peace? A rude comment, a missed opportunity, a failed plan. We carry anger, disappointment, and bitterness over things that, compared to Eddie's struggles, are tiny. Yet those small things can weigh us down because we let them. Eddie teaches us that if he could forgive, if he could smile, if he could find happiness after Auschwitz, then surely we can find happiness in our everyday lives. Eddie often said, "Hatred is a disease that destroys the one who hates." And he lived by those words. He had every reason to hate, every reason to be bitter, every reason to spend his life angry at the world. But he knew that hatred would only make him suffer more. Hatred would only keep him chained to the past. So he let it go. He chose forgiveness, not for the sake of those who wronged him, but for the sake of his own peace. That's the lesson. Forgiveness is freedom. Let's pause here and ask, what are you holding on to that you need to forgive? Maybe someone betrayed you. Maybe life didn't give you what you deserved. Maybe the pain feels too deep to ever let go. But Eddie's life is proof that forgiveness is possible, even when the wound is unimaginable. And if forgiveness can heal a Holocaust survivor, imagine what it could do for you. As Eddie rebuilt his life in Australia, he became known not just for his story, but for his smile. People noticed how he carried himself. They noticed how he treated others with kindness. They noticed that he radiated joy. And when they asked him how, his answer was always the same: gratitude. Every morning he woke up and thanked life for giving him another day. He didn't need riches or fame. He had his family, his freedom, and his health. And that was enough. This is a radical idea in today's world. We live in a culture that constantly tells us we're missing something. Ads tell us we need more money, more beauty, more success, more recognition. But Eddie stood as living proof that happiness isn't about more. Happiness is about enough. When you can look at what you have and say, "This is enough," you unlock a kind of peace that nothing can take away. Eddie didn't just keep this wisdom for himself. He dedicated his life to sharing it. For decades, he spoke to schools, to communities, to young people searching for meaning. He told them about the horrors of his past. But more importantly, he told them about the beauty of life. He told them to be kind, to love one another, to never take for granted the small blessings of life. A meal, a friend, a safe home. Thousands of young people walked away from his talks changed forever, carrying his lessons with them. And here's the beautiful irony. The Nazis wanted to erase him, to silence him, to destroy his legacy. But instead, Eddie lived more than a century. His voice carried across the world. His words touched millions of lives. And his story will outlive the hate that tried to destroy him. That is the power of choosing joy. That is the power of choosing kindness. That is the power of refusing to give hate the final word. Now let me ask you, are you choosing joy? Or are you letting bitterness control your story? Are you living as if tomorrow is promised? Or are you wasting today on anger? Because life is short. Eddie knew this better than anyone, and that's why he squeezed every drop of beauty out of his days. He laughed. He smiled. He loved deeply. He forgave freely. And he became a living reminder that happiness is always possible, even when the world says otherwise. When you listen to Eddie's story, you realize something. Happiness is not luck. Happiness is discipline. It's the discipline of gratitude, the discipline of forgiveness, the discipline of kindness. It's a practice, not a prize. And it's available to you right now, if only you choose it. So, the next time you feel weighed down, remember Eddie. Remember the man who walked out of Auschwitz with nothing, but chose to build a life of joy. Remember that happiness is in your hands. And remember his words, life can be beautiful if you make it beautiful. Because at the end of the day, the world doesn't need more people chasing happiness. It needs more people choosing happiness. And you can be one of them. Imagine walking into a room filled with teenagers. They're restless, distracted, some scrolling on their phones, some half listening. And then an old man walks in. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't need to. He just smiles, and suddenly the room falls silent. That was the power of Eddie Jaku, a man who had lived through the worst darkness humanity had to offer, yet radiated a light so strong it captured every heart around him. That light was not just survival, it was love, it was hope, it was humanity at its purest form. Eddie spent decades traveling to schools, universities, and communities to share his story. He knew that young people were the key to a better future. He believed that if he could teach them kindness, if he could help them understand the dangers of hatred, then maybe history would never repeat itself. And so, he dedicated his later years not to bitterness, but to teaching, to planting seeds of compassion in the hearts of the next generation. He often began with the truth of his past, the starvation, the brutality, the unimaginable cruelty of the camps. He didn't sugarcoat it. He wanted them to know how fragile freedom really is. But he didn't stop there. He didn't leave them drowning in despair. Instead, he pulled them toward the surface with a message of resilience. He told them, yes, I suffered. Yes, I lost everything. But I chose life. I chose kindness. And you can too. Think about that. A man who had every reason to despise the world chose instead to love it. A man who had every reason to give up chose instead to inspire. That's not weakness. That's strength in its highest form. And in that strength, he gave people hope. Eddie believed that kindness was the only real cure for hatred. He said many times, a smile is the greatest weapon. To him, a smile wasn't just an expression. It was resistance. It was defiance against the cruelty he had faced. It was a daily reminder that joy could survive even in a world that tried to erase it. Every time he smiled, he wasn't just being polite. He was proving that love is stronger than hate. This is a lesson that feels more urgent today than ever. In a world filled with division, anger, and endless conflict, Eddie's wisdom cuts through the noise. Be kind. Not because it's easy, not because it's trendy, but because kindness is what keeps humanity alive. You don't have to survive Auschwitz to understand this. You just have to look around and see how desperately the world needs compassion. But here's the part most people overlook. Kindness is not passive. It's not just being nice. For Eddie, kindness was active. It meant choosing to forgive when you could hold a grudge. It meant helping others when you had little yourself. It meant standing up against injustice, even when it was risky. Kindness was not weakness. It was courage. It was strength disguised as gentleness. And this is why people loved him. Because when Eddie spoke, you didn't just hear his words. You felt them. You felt the authenticity, the rawness, the truth. He didn't speak from theory. He spoke from lived experience. He had walked through hell, and yet he stood before them smiling, telling them that life is still beautiful. And when he said it, you believed him. Eddie's message reached far beyond classrooms. His book, The Happiest Man on Earth, became a global phenomenon. Millions read his words and found themselves reflecting on their own lives. Suddenly, people began to see their problems differently. That job they didn't get, that argument with a friend, that setback in life, compared to what Eddie endured, those problems seemed small. And in that shift of perspective, they found gratitude. They found strength. Gratitude was Eddie's anchor. He woke up every morning grateful just to be alive. Imagine that. A man who had spent years in concentration camp, who had been starved, beaten, and stripped of everything, woke up each day with a smile and said, "Today is a gift." He reminded people that the simplest things, a warm meal, a safe home, a hug from a loved one, are miracles we often take for granted. He taught us that happiness isn't found in what you want, but in appreciating what you already have. And that's something we need to pause on, because in our modern lives, we're constantly chasing more. More money, more recognition, more comfort. But Eddie's life flips that script. He says, stop chasing, start appreciating. Happiness isn't at the end of the chase. Happiness is right here, right now, if you choose to see it. But Eddie also warned of something important. Hatred doesn't vanish on its own. It grows when people are silent. It thrives when people look away. That's why he spoke so openly about his past, not to spread fear, but to awaken courage. He wanted young people to understand that the fight against hate is everyone's responsibility. That indifference is dangerous. That silence can be as deadly as violence. And so, he challenged them, be the generation that chooses love over hate. Eddie didn't just talk about humanity. He embodied it. He lived it in the way he treated people. Whether it was a stranger on the street, a student in the audience, or a journalist interviewing him, he always gave them his full presence, his full kindness. People walked away from him feeling lighter, more hopeful, more human. That was his gift. And maybe that's the biggest lesson of all. That one person can make a difference. Eddie was just one man. He didn't have wealth or power or political influence. But with his story, his smile, and his wisdom, he touched millions. He proved that influence doesn't come from status. It comes from authenticity, from living your truth, from choosing love again and again. So ask yourself, what kind of influence are you leaving behind? Are you spreading bitterness? Or are you spreading kindness? Are you living in fear? Or are you inspiring hope? Because if Eddie could rise from the ashes of the Holocaust and choose to make the world brighter, then so can we. At the heart of Eddie's message was this simple truth. Life is precious. Every breath, every moment, every relationship is a gift. Don't waste it on hate. Don't waste it on regret. Don't waste it on waiting for tomorrow. Live it fully. Love deeply. Smile often. Because one day, when you look back, you'll realize that happiness was never about what you gained. It was about what you gave. And that's why Eddie Jaku, the man who lost everything, became known around the world as the happiest man on earth. Not because his life was easy, but because he made a choice every single day to love, to forgive, to be kind, and to be grateful. And that choice is available to you too, right now, in this very moment. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine being 100 years old. Most people at that age will be tired, fragile, and perhaps even bitter about the difficulties they faced. But Eddie Jaku was different. At more than 100 years old, he sat with a sparkle in his eyes, with a smile on his face, and with words that could move hearts across generations. His body may have aged, but his spirit was timeless. And that spirit carried a simple but powerful philosophy. Life can always be beautiful if you choose to make it beautiful. Eddie lived through more pain than most of us could ever imagine. He saw cruelty in its rawest form. He experienced hunger that gnawed at his bones, fear that haunted every waking moment, and the loss of family that no words could ever heal. And yet, he emerged from all of that with wisdom that can guide every single one of us today. He often said, "I do not hate anyone. Hate is a disease which may destroy your enemy, but will also destroy you." Think about that for a moment. How often do we let hate, anger, or resentment sit in our hearts? Maybe we don't even realize it, but those feelings eat away at us from the inside. Eddie knew this truth all too well. He understood that hatred doesn't just hurt others, it poisons the one who carries it. And so, he made a conscious choice to free himself from it. That's why even at 100 years old, he could smile with genuine joy. His heart wasn't chained by bitterness. It was free. This is one of Eddie's greatest lessons. Freedom doesn't just come from the outside. True freedom is found within. You can live in a free country, but if your mind is trapped by anger, by jealousy, by greed, then you are not truly free. Eddie, who had once been imprisoned in a literal concentration camp, knew the power of inner freedom, and he wanted everyone to understand that the key to happiness lies in releasing the burdens of hate and choosing kindness instead. But Eddie's philosophy wasn't just about avoiding negativity. It was about actively embracing gratitude. Every morning he woke up and said to himself, "Today I am alive. Today I have another chance to smile, to love, to give." He didn't wait for perfect circumstances. He didn't need everything to be right in his life to feel joy. He created joy by focusing on what he had, not what he lacked. How often do we do the opposite? We scroll through social media, comparing our lives to others. We think happiness will come when we get that job, that house, that recognition. But Eddie flips the script. He teaches us that happiness is not in the someday, it's in the today. It's in the simple act of being alive. It's in the chance to share kindness with someone else. It's in the gift of being able to hug your child, to laugh with a friend, to see another sunrise. And that's another powerful lesson Eddie shared. Happiness is not about taking. It's about giving. When he spoke to schools, when he shared his story, when he offered a smile to a stranger, he was giving. And in that giving, he received more happiness than he could have ever imagined, because joy multiplies when you share it. Eddie also spoke about resilience. He reminded people that life will always have challenges, some so heavy that they seem unbearable. But he was living proof that even the worst suffering doesn't have to define you. He said, "You can find light even in darkness if you look for it." Those words are not abstract. They are the testimony of a man who survived the darkest chapter of history and still chose to seek light. Imagine carrying that perspective into your own life. When problems come, and they always will, you can crumble under them, or you can choose resilience. You can choose to say, "This challenge will not break me. It will shape me." That is the Eddie mindset, and it's one that can turn even the hardest seasons into lessons of strength. Eddie's century-long wisdom also carried a warning: don't waste time. He knew that life is short, even if you're lucky enough to live 100 years. Time is the one thing you can never get back. And so he urged people to spend it wisely, not on hate, not on regret, not on greed, but on love, kindness, and gratitude. He reminded us that the true wealth of life isn't in money or possessions, but in relationships, in memories, in moments of joy. And perhaps what made Eddie so inspiring was the fact that he didn't just say these things. He lived them. Even at his age, he kept showing up to share his story. He kept smiling. He kept giving. He kept reminding people that happiness is possible for everyone, no matter what they've been through. His life was a living demonstration of his philosophy. Now, let's bring this home. Think about your own life. Where are you holding on to hate? Where are you waiting for someday to be happy? Where are you wasting precious time on things that don't matter? Eddie's wisdom invites you to stop waiting, to let go of what's holding you back, and start living fully now. Because the truth is, happiness isn't a mystery. It's a choice. It's not something you find. It's something you create. Eddie Jaku, a man who lost everything, who had every reason to despair, proved this with every smile he shared, every story he told, and every lesson he passed on. He became, not by chance, but by choice, the happiest man on earth. And if he could do it, so can you. So today, remember his words. Life can be beautiful if you make it beautiful. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Don't wait for the storm to pass. Choose beauty now. Choose kindness now. Choose happiness now. Because that's the greatest legacy Eddie left us. Not just a story, but the reminder that each of us has the power to live with joy, no matter what. Picture this. A man in his 90s, then in his hundreds, standing before an audience that could be his great-grandchildren. His voice is gentle but steady. His body is frail, but his spirit glows with energy. The crowd listens, not because he is famous, not because he is powerful, but because every word he speaks carries the weight of survival, the weight of truth, the weight of love. That man was Eddie Jaku. And in the final years of his life, he became more than a survivor. He became a beacon of humanity. When Eddie crossed the milestone of turning 100, the world celebrated with him. He was interviewed, honored, and invited to share his story on global platforms. But Eddie never let recognition define him. He always said, "I am not special. I am just a man who has chosen to be kind, to be grateful, to be happy." And yet, in saying that, he revealed the secret. True greatness is not in what you achieve, but in who you choose to be. In those last years, Eddie's mission became clearer than ever. He wanted to leave behind a message strong enough to outlive him. He knew he would not be here forever, but his words, his lessons, his smile, they could last. And so he poured himself into teaching. Every talk, every interview, every page of his book carried the urgency of a man who had seen too much to stay silent. He reminded the world of the horrors of hatred, not to depress us, but to wake us up. He warned against indifference, because silence is what allowed evil to grow in his time. And then, after showing us the darkness, he gave us light. He told us to live with gratitude, to treasure our freedom, to treat every human being with kindness. His legacy was not just survival, it was transformation. He turned suffering into wisdom and wisdom into hope. Eddie's presence in those later years was extraordinary. People described meeting him as unforgettable. They said he had a way of looking at you, of really seeing you, that made you feel valued, important, human. In a world rushing with distraction, he slowed everything down to remind people of what truly matters: connection, kindness, and love. Even his book title, The Happiest Man on Earth, was deliberate. He wanted to shock people into realizing that happiness is possible anywhere, even after the darkest storms. He wanted people to look at him, a Holocaust survivor, a man who lost his family, a man who faced starvation and brutality, and then hear him say he was the happiest man alive. That contrast was a lesson itself. If he could find happiness, so could we. And what made Eddie happiest in his final years was not fame, but family. He adored his wife, his children, his grandchildren. He spoke often about how love gave him strength, how family gave him joy. The Nazis had tried to destroy not just his life, but his future. Yet here he was, surrounded by generations of love. That, he said, was the ultimate victory. Love had defeated hate. Life had defeated death. Think about how powerful that is. Eddie's story wasn't just about survival. It was about reclaiming joy, about proving that hate does not get the last word. He left behind a legacy not built on monuments or riches, but on hearts he touched, lives he changed, and wisdom he shared. In his final talks, Eddie often said, "Tomorrow will come, and you must be there to enjoy it." It was his way of reminding people to never give up, no matter how hard the day may feel. He knew better than anyone that the future can hold beauty, even if the present is painful. And that hope, that belief in tomorrow, was the anchor of his philosophy. The truth is, Eddie's life forces us to ask ourselves some hard questions. What are we doing with our time? Are we wasting it on anger, on regret, on chasing things that don't matter? Or are we living fully, loving deeply, giving freely? Eddie's legacy challenges us to rethink our choices, because he showed us that life is too short to be lived any other way. When Eddie passed away at 101 years old, the world mourned, but it also celebrated. It celebrated a man who had endured the worst of humanity, but still believed in the best of it. It celebrated his courage, his smile, his kindness. And in that celebration, his legacy grew even larger. Because the truth is, Eddie Jocko is gone, but Eddie Jocko is not gone. His words are still here. His lessons are still here. His spirit is still here. Every time someone chooses kindness over hate, gratitude over bitterness, happiness over despair. So as we reflect on his final years, let's carry forward his message. Let's honor him not with silence, but with action. Let's be kind. Let's be grateful. Let's live every day as if it is the precious gift that it is. Because that's what Eddie would want. That's how Eddie would want us to remember him. Not by his suffering, but by his joy. And so in his memory, ask yourself, what choice will you make today? Will you hold on to bitterness, or will you release it? Will you chase happiness someday, or will you create it today? Will you waste time, or will you treasure it? The answers are in your hands. Eddie showed us the way. Now it's our turn to live it. Because at the end of it all, the legacy of Eddie Jocko is not just a story of one man. It is a reminder that happiness is possible for everyone, that kindness is always stronger than hate, that life, no matter how broken, can always be made beautiful. And that is a message worth carrying, not just for a day, not just for a lifetime, but for generations to come. If you've stayed with this story from beginning until now, then you know this is not just a story of one man. This is a story of resilience. This is the story of forgiveness. This is a story of love. And above all, this is a story of choosing happiness against all odds. Eddie Jocko did not just survive. He lived. He lived in such a way that every single day became a victory, a rebellion against hate, and a celebration of life itself. Eddie's journey forces us to confront something deep inside ourselves. How often do we waste time on anger? How often do we let bitterness define us? How often do we wait for happiness, as if it's something that might appear tomorrow instead of something we can create today? Eddie looked at the world differently. After losing almost everything, he decided to make every breath count. He decided that life was too precious to be spent on hate. And so he smiled. He forgave. He loved. He lived. His story is proof that happiness is not found in what happens to us. It's found in how we respond. Eddie's life was shaped by unimaginable cruelty, but his response shaped his destiny. He responded with kindness. He responded with gratitude. He responded with a fierce determination to prove that joy is stronger than despair. That is why, when people asked him how he could call himself the happiest man on earth, he didn't hesitate. He knew it was true, because happiness is not luck. Happiness is choice. And that choice is in front of you right now. You may not have control over every circumstance in your life. You may not be able to erase the pain of the past, but you do have control over what you do with this moment. You can choose to smile. You can choose to be grateful. You can choose to forgive. You can choose to live fully, not someday, not when things are perfect, but today. Eddie's greatest gift to us was perspective. He reminded us that freedom is fragile, that love is essential, and that kindness is never wasted. He reminded us that the true measure of life is not in years, but in how deeply you live those years. He reminded us that even after tragedy, beauty can return, joy can return, and hope can return if you let it. And here's the truth. Eddie is gone now. He passed away at 101 years old. But his story is not finished. Because every time you choose kindness instead of hate, his story continues. Every time you practice gratitude, his story continues. Every time you smile at a stranger, forgive someone who hurt you, or hug the people you love a little tighter, his story continues. That is legacy. That is immortality. Not in statues, not in monuments, but in hearts transformed by his example. So the question is, what will you do with Eddie's gift? Will you walk away from his story unchanged? Or will you let it alter the way you live? Because life is short, no matter how many years you're given. And the greatest way to honor Eddie Jocko is not by remembering his suffering, but by living his joy. Maybe right now you're facing your own struggles. Maybe life feels heavy. Maybe happiness feels far away. But remember Eddie. Remember the man who walked out of Auschwitz with nothing and still became the happiest man on earth. Remember his words. Life can be beautiful if you make it beautiful. Hold on to that truth like a lifeline, because it is, because you can, because happiness is always within reach, if only you choose it. And here's the call I leave you with. Don't wait. Don't wait to forgive. Don't wait to say, I love you. Don't wait to smile. Don't wait to be happy. Tomorrow is not promised, and Eddie knew this better than anyone. So make today count. Make this moment count. Make your life count. The happiest man on earth is gone, but his message lives. Carry it forward. Carry it in the way you treat people. Carry it in the way you wake up with gratitude. Carry it in the way you refuse to let hate win. Carry it in the way you choose to make life beautiful. Because in the end, that is what matters. That is what endures. That is what transforms the world. And so, as this story comes to a close, let Eddie's words echo in your heart. Happiness does not fall from the sky. It's in your hands. Life is what you make it. The rest of your story is unwritten. Make it beautiful. Make it joyful. Make it worth remembering. And there you have it, the life of Eddie Jaku, the happiest man on earth. A man who lost almost everything, yet left the world with more wisdom than most of us could gather in a lifetime. His legacy is not just survival. It's proof that joy is always a choice. Now, the story is in your hands. How will you live differently? How will you bring more kindness, more forgiveness, more gratitude into your days? Because Eddie's voice doesn't end here. It continues through you. Thank you for listening. And if this story touched your heart, share it with someone you care about. Let Eddie's message echo further. Choose happiness. Choose life. And remember, as Eddie said, happiness does not fall from the sky. It's in your hands. If this story inspired you, don't forget to share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe for more powerful, life-changing audiobooks like this one.